Hi lovelies, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if you're new here, first of all, I'm Jade and welcome to you. And today I'm going to talk about 10 things that they don't really tell you about having a baby. And this is talking about like part labour and part pregnancy and part labour. So I'm going to talk about things that aren't your typical textbook situations, as I feel that every pregnancy and every labour is completely different. So it's really good to get a different perspective on what that was like for somebody else, or things that they don't always necessarily tell you, just that you can have a bit more of understanding going into that really important part of your new baby experience. So rather than me rambling on, let's get into the video. So first things first is every single labour is different. And let me tell you that it does not happen like you see on the TV or in films. Like, you know, where they're running into the labour ward and they're on their wheelchair and they're screaming because the contraction's so painful and their waters have burst just before and they're all over the floor. Like, that does not happen. Does not happen. Sometimes your waters don't even break at all. Sometimes they break and you don't go into labour. So for myself, I was probably in early labour for about 2 to 3 days. I had cramps for about 2 days, about 15 minutes apart. And then my waters broke about a day into those, like 2 days. And I didn't go into labour. So I then had to be induced the following day because if your waters break, you're prone to infection. So I had to be induced. But as I said, everyone's different. Sometimes you can literally go into labour like that within hours. Again, your waters might not break. It can be completely different. So don't judge your labour on anybody else's because they're all completely different. So number 2, there's such thing as an anterior placenta. I think that's how you say it, anterior. So basically means that your placenta's sitting on the front wall of your womb. So the baby's sitting behind your placenta and then you'll have your belly. So this will mean that you feel your baby less because there's so much padding from the baby and your stomach, which I didn't realise. I didn't get told that I had this, and it caused a lot of worry because I had quite a few people that were pregnant at a similar time to me, and I noticed that they were starting to feel baby movements and I couldn't feel anything. And then when we could feel movements, I noticed that, like, my friends or people I knew, you could really see movements from their stomachs. You could see like little punches and kicks from the baby and their belly move, where I could feel it internally but you couldn't really see it externally. And it really made me worry, and I kind of googled a lot, which always causes issues. If you Google stuff, it always gives you the worst possible scenario, but luckily I did, because then I come across the fact that I had, and in my next midwife appointment I asked if that was the case and she said yes. But if I hadn't have asked myself or I hadn't have googled it, I wouldn't have necessarily known. So that's something just to bear in mind. And actually the feeding will be dulled slightly because it's got so much cushioning between the baby and your stomach. So number 3, you don't always have the symptoms that you're told you should have when you're pregnant. So I didn't have morning sickness. I didn't have any cravings. To be honest, I had a really easy pregnancy. I'm actually scared to have another baby just in case it doesn't happen again. It's the complete opposite, because I know that it can be completely different for everybody. But when I was searching for what it was like being pregnant or what the symptoms were, kind of everything that I read or everything that I watched told me what the symptoms should be, which were nothing what I had. So I didn't come across anybody that kind of didn't have any symptoms. So I thought that I would bring that one up because there's probably other people out there that don't, and I think that it's important to understand that if you don't, it's fine. Because I found that because I didn't, I googled a lot, and that's the worst thing that you can do. Sometimes it's good because actually Google can be really helpful, but in this circumstance it kind of just made you feel that something was wrong if you weren't having these symptoms. But actually the reality was that everything was perfectly fine and really healthy. So I just want you to know that if you don't have any symptoms, it's absolutely fine. So if you haven't had any sickness, any cravings or any of those typical symptoms, then just think yourself lucky. You're one of the lucky ones. Number 4, you don't have a bump straight away. So when I got pregnant, I was like, whoa, where's my bump out? I'm going to dress my bump. I'm going to make it all look cute. No, your your bump's not there until like a good, well, mine didn't like pop until I'd say 6 months. So you don't, like, you have this weird feeling in early pregnancy where you just don't feel pregnant because it's not physically there. I think that with I think that when you've already had a baby, your pregnancies afterwards, you do develop a bump a little bit quicker, but especially on your first pregnancy, because your muscles are still really tight, it doesn't show for quite a while. You go through this like fat stage, like where you just feel a bit chubby, like you've put on some weight, rather than it being a natural pregnancy bump. So just prepare that it doesn't work like that. You don't just have a bump appear as soon as you're like, I'm pregnant. It does take a while for that to come, but when it does, I absolutely loved my bump and enjoy it because it does go so quickly. It feels long at the time, but afterwards you realise it's gone so quickly. So number 5 is bonding with your baby when they're finally here. So I just want you to know that if you don't feel that initial bond straight away, don't worry. I think that we're so programmed to think that when you give birth, you have this overwhelming feeling of love and joy and you automatically love your baby more than anything. It's really emotional and kind of like, that's it. But sometimes you don't. I didn't feel that initial connection for a little while. But when I first had my baby, I was so exhausted and overwhelmed by the labour and the pain and the emotion that you've just gone through for hours, and the toll it takes on your mind and body is just crazy, that I just felt exhausted. I felt too tired to have any more emotion, if that makes sense. But if you don't feel that bond and that automatic connection straight away, don't feel bad about it, because it is such an overwhelming experience as a whole. But a few days after, when you start to relax, you finally have a good sleep and your body starts to recover a little bit more, then you will find that bond, and it's just the most amazing feeling ever. So number 6, what cramps and contractions actually feel like. So I know when I started to feel cramps, I didn't know what they were. Like, were they actually contractions? What are cramps compared to contractions? Are cramps just what you get during pregnancy? Does it mean I'm in labour? I just didn't really understand the difference or what to actually expect. But all I can explain it is, especially in early labour, is that it's like a period pain, like a really horrible period pain. They won't be every 2 minutes, every 5 minutes. Mine come like every 15 minutes for about 2 days. So at night, the level of sleep I got was 0 for about 2-3 days, and then going into labour just felt like I hadn't slept at all for about 4 days. I was just exhausted. But they do feel like period pains. That's the best way that I can describe it. And I was convinced that they were proper contractions. So when I spoke to the nurse, when my waters broke, I was like, no, I'm having contractions. She was like, you're not, like, you'll know. And I'm like, I'm having contractions. I know I'm having contractions. She's like, they're really not. You'll know when you have contractions. She was right. She was right. When I had contractions, oh my God. When you're there, the overwhelming feeling of pain makes it less painful, if that makes sense. That you're enduring so much pain that it numbs the pain. I don't know if that makes sense. And it does help you through that process of actually giving birth to your baby. If you didn't have contractions, then it would be really hard. So I opted out of an epidural because I just felt that it would take away that feeling of the contraction and the push. I feel that I really needed that in order to kind of get that baby out. And after having a baby, I know why I needed that, because there's no way I was pushing that out without a contraction. But yeah, so that's the best way I can describe it, is that it is like a really painful period pain, and that then it will develop into a proper contraction, which is painful. It is bearable, and you have lots of drugs and options there as well to ease the pain if you want to. So number 7, you'll have the feeling of wanting to back out. So when I got taken into the room to finally deliver my baby, and honestly I wanted to back out. I was like, do you know what guys, how about we just leave it for today? How about we do it tomorrow? And they're like, no Jade, it's happening now. But yeah, obviously that's not going to happen. You have to have that baby, but afterwards it is worth it. So number 8, the head is the worst part. So I was in labour for about 5.5 hours. So what, 4.5 hours roughly was contractions, and then the final bit is the head. So it's the shortest part, which is great, but oh my freaking God. I'm sorry for you that are about to give birth, but I was interested to know what it actually felt like, because everyone's like, oh no, it's fine, like don't worry about it, like it's nothing. No, like I'm not gonna lie to you, it burns. It burns. So the head, like I said, is the worst part because you are stretched to the max. So I know a lot of people say it feels like a Chinese burn, but I get it, but I don't get it. Like I can't imagine a Chinese burn down there. Like that sensation I can relate to. But you know when you stretch like a bit of skin so much that you get that burn from the stretch, I guess that's the feeling. So where it's stretched so much, that's the burning sensation that you'll get. And that is a very, very overwhelming pain. I'm just thinking about it now, and my lady parts are just like getting a bit nervous, I think, of the fall. But it does hurt. Like let's not beat around the bush. It does hurt, but do you forget about it? Abso-friggin-lutely. Like I know it hurt, but can I remember the actual pain? Not really. Would I do it again? Yeah, of course I would. You do get over it very, very quickly, but that is the worst part. But as I said, it's the worst part, but it is the shortest part. So pushing that head out, and then once the head's out, the rest of the body just kind of like slivers out. Like it's a really weird feeling. It is really weird, but it just does kind of like just sliver out like that. But yeah, the head's the worst part. The rest of the body, absolutely fine. But yeah, I'm gonna be real with you guys. That is the feeling. But like I said, it is easily forgotten about. So number 9 is tearing. So I remember when me and my partner went to a birthing talk, and they were like, oh yes, there's 3 types of tears, as it's likely that you'll tear. And we were like, what? What the my is gonna tear? Or they might have to cut it. No, I'm done. I am done. But I have to say, you wouldn't even know. So I tore when I gave birth. Again, sorry about the TMI, but I want to be real with you, and because you need to know. So I did tear, but like you wouldn't even know. So much pain anyway that you're feeling that you honestly don't even know you've torn until you've had the baby, and then they're like, oh, you've had a tear, I'm just gonna like put a few stitches in. You wouldn't know. So that for me was the worst bit. I was like so scared of tearing, when in fact that was the least thing to worry about. Like literally do not have that as a worry in your mind, because like I said, you would not even know that you've torn, honestly. Lastly, number 10, how you can relate to other people that have had or are having children is just crazy. No one can physically or mentally understand childbirth unless you've gone through it yourself. I just remember the first thought going, do you know what, Mum, like, well done. Like, I had so much more respect for my mum than I've ever had, and then a few people around me had babies quite close by, and I just couldn't be any prouder, because I knew exactly what they had been through and what they had experienced, and nothing can prepare you for childbirth, nothing. It's such an amazing experience, that all the pain, all the worry, everything that you've been through beforehand is just so worth it. I could talk about this subject for ages, but they're just 10 things that I wish people had told me before I had a baby. But if you can think of any others that I haven't mentioned, then feel free to drop them below. If you do like this video and you want more, please give me a thumbs up, because then I know that you like the video. If you are expecting a baby, then let me know below as well, and congratulations. But that's all for today, and if you want to see more, please subscribe and turn on the notifications, and they'll let you know when I've uploaded a new video. Thank you for listening, guys. Bye.